don't rush into coming to the UK if you don't have experience. You might struggle having to integrate into the system. First of all, thank you for inviting me here, Obina. So my name is Nnaemeka, and I'm a medical radiographer. To some of you, this might be a new terminology. I've had people have misconception about my profession, saying, "Oh, the first time they heard about radiography, they thought it's something has to do with working in a radio station or something like that." So first of all, as a radiographer, I'm responsible for medical imaging using modalities, what we call modalities or equipment, such as MRI, CT, X-ray, ultrasound, mammography, as the case may be. However, I am specialized in CT and MRI, and so my day-to-day activity would involve, having face-to-face contact with patients in a hospital, having to provide their medical imaging using these modalities. In my case, CT and MRI, and also having to reassure them and hoping for the best outcome when the result comes out. So yeah, it's everything that has to do with patient-facing, medical imaging, patient care. That's just basically it. And as a mobile radiographer, which means I am not static in one hospital. I get to move to different locations doing all of this, and I work in a mobile facility. The MRI scanner, instead of being in a building, it's actually in a mobile facility, like a truck, so to speak. Some of them that are not like trucks could be like an expandable, purpose-built facility that houses these machines. And so I go in this unit and provide my services throughout the day. So that's what I do.
That sounds interesting, Nnaemeka. This job you're doing here in the UK, did you get this job while you were in Nigeria, or were you in the UK already maybe studying or doing something before you got this job?
That's a good question, Abina. Actually, when I finished my BSc in Nigeria, I was working in Lagos State, in a bit to want something more out of life, I started like asking questions from my senior colleagues, and it was possible for me to really get a job from Nigeria straight to the UK, and that was what happened. So yes, I got this job from while I was back home in Nigeria. Had my interview online, but yes, I obviously had the UK equivalent qualification to apply for the job. So just one evening, I was really desperately looking for opportunities outside Nigeria. I wasn't even thinking, UK or Canada. I was just looking for anywhere outside of the country. Tailored myself to UK because I already had the qualification for the UK healthcare practice.
Sorry, if you don't mind me asking, what's this qualification you talk about? What's this UK equivalent qualification?
Yeah, it's called HCPC, Health and Care Professions Council.
Right.
So it's a qualification for healthcare workers. It's not for everybody. It's not so medicine and surgery. As medical doctors, they are not part of this license. So it's for allied healthcare professionals. That's the word. It's really for the other healthcare professionals that are not nurses and doctors.
Right.
Yes. So if you go to the HCPC website, you will then see all of the professions that's been named that's qualified to have that qualification or license. It's not meant for everybody. It's meant for a selected group of allied healthcare professionals.
Right.
So yeah. So the details about the registration is there. It's very simple and straightforward. However, back to what I was saying. So I had that license, and it was a prerequisite for me to practice in the UK. So I had to search for jobs, and I found, a couple of jobs online, applied, and I was called for an interview. And so we had then it was Skype. It wasn't really
right.
Zoom. So we had a Skype interview.
Yeah.
And every other thing. Yeah.
You said you started asking questions. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what was the motivation? I mean, you could have stayed and practiced in Nigeria, and you could have actually gone to any other country, to Europe, to Canada, to United States. And so my question will be in twofold. What is the motivation, first of all, to leave Nigeria? And then secondly, why the choice of the UK?
Yeah. To be fair, I mean, this is a question I get that all the time. And what I usually say is, from my own perspective, why is number one, for one reason. When I was in school, I had the choice of going into the subspecialties in radiography. So I could decide I wanted to go into ultrasound, CT, or MRI. I could go into mammography, that's the breast scan for ladies. I could go into clear medicine.
Yeah.
And looking at the Nigerian space or the healthcare system in Nigeria, it was one that didn't really have solid, some sort of solid, what's it called? The system was not so solidified that I could practice CT or MRI in the way I wanted, because we had deficient scanners in Nigeria. A lot of hospitals, they don't even know these things exist because they were not nowhere around. If you went in Lagos or Abuja, you probably will not even get to see, as a student, you can't get to see, to appreciate what you've been taught in school. So during my posting days, I found myself in Lagos, and I was doing CT and MRI during my posting days. And I really took interest in these two modalities. And so if I wanted to really maximize my potential and grow in my career, then I didn't see myself staying back in Nigeria if we were quite deficient in these modalities.
Right.
And so what was my other option? It was to look for countries with advanced technology. And UK being the easiest pathway for radiographers, appealed to me. I looked at the system. It was something I could really, lay my hands around and practice happily. Also, the fact that UK is just 6 hours from Nigeria is a plus. Yeah. So yes, this is the basic reason. Every other thing is built around this basic reason.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. You talked about, I think you touched on it when you said you applied, you got called for an interview. So can you zoom in a little bit? Like, how easy is it to get these jobs? Did you do multiple applications? I'm asking because I'm sure there are people who are looking to walk the path you've already walked. Did you send in the first application and get the job or the interview? Or tell me a bit more about the application process. How did you apply for these jobs?
Yeah, so the radiographers are really, I would term them hotcakes at the moment globally, and that's because there is really we don't have enough radiographers globally to handle all of the cases. I'll give you an example. For instance, in the UK during COVID, it was really bizarre. We couldn't handle all of our cases. We had backlogs, and so there was this constant need to recruit radiographers, not within but internationally. And because people are not really so much aware about this profession, they don't go into it, they don't study it, or because they've really heard about some of the myths, like, oh, if you're a radiographer or you do X-ray, you get cancer, you die, all of those things, put them off, and they don't study it. So you get to see, like, in a country, you have deficient number of radiographers, and so because of the need for radiographers, we are highly sought after. And so when I applied for my role, it wasn't a straightforward, oh yes, let's just apply him. No, I actually had a series of interviews, about 4 or 5 different times, and I got this one.
The 5 interviews are for this job or for different applications?
For different hospitals.
Right.
For different hospitals. Yeah. Sometimes the reason for not being taken eventually could be, oh, we can't recruit internationally, we are not allowed to. And that's because some hospitals don't really have the capacity to do that. So and also it could be performance based, based on the questions and the interview process, or anything could have led to not getting hired, right? But I actually got mine after like the 5th interview. You would have to really keep applying if you've not gotten any response, because if a hospital has the option of employing someone in the UK, why would they want to go international? They'll give priority to people within, and also some other factors that could play out. Maybe UK experience is needed for this particular role, and there won't be any need to go international. So that was it for me.
Okay, no, that's good. Just now you talked about experience or UK experience. My question would be, can someone, I mean, I understand you practice, right? So you practice a bit in Lagos, you mentioned. Can someone who just comes out from the university in Nigeria apply for a radiographer job in the UK and get it? Or if you put it another way, do you need some form of experience before you can get hired to somewhere you've been hired?
Yeah, I'll say yes and no. Yes, because people who have actually just come out of school as fresh graduates do get hired here.
Right.
But at what point are they coming in? That's the question. Do you get what I mean? So they could get hired as graduate radiographers with training, being promised. So an organization can decide, okay, we want to hire fresh graduates. Okay. And then we provide them with adequate training when they eventually get into the role. So that is a possibility. And they start with like the low bands. We have the different bandings. So so they do that. But again, I think a lot of hospitals, they want to really maximize their so if you're going to employ international, you want to get the best brains, you want to get someone who's experienced, you want to really demonstrate that, the reason you're hiring international is because you want someone who would not cause, it would not be a burden to your system, right? So it is easier, I think, to get people who already have some sort of experience. They're not looking for people with, who are experts, people who can demonstrate also the willingness to learn and willingness to integrate into the sector, the healthcare sector in the UK, also open to learning about the policies and learning about the work.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, one more question I'll ask, or another question I'll ask you is, I mean, you've mentioned that the standards, you noticed that the standards in Nigeria were subpar, lower than what you would have expected. So you sought for UK because of the class equipment and practice. Now, apart from that, what difference do you find working as a radiographer in Nigeria versus working as a radiographer in the UK? What are the major, outstanding differences?
So first of all, is to also say that radiography is radiography globally. What does that mean? It's the fact that the scanners we use, the machines we use, they are all the same.
Right.
It could vary in vendors, different vendors having their different brands. However, an MRI scanner is an MRI scanner, CT scanner is a CT scanner, irrespective of the country, wherever it is. So the only difference that I noticed, for me particularly, is the fact that coming to the UK, there were things that we could do in Nigeria that were not really allowed anymore here in the UK. And these are things to do with like policies and patient handling, how we attend to our patients. There are things to do with strict rules regarding how we scan our patients. For instance, if I was in Nigeria and you come for an X-ray, for instance, I could do a chest X-ray, and if it wasn't really as nice as I wanted as a radiographer, I would say, you know what, I want to repeat this X-ray because of XYZ reasons, and I have the autonomy to do that. Whereas here, you'd have to, report it as an incident. You have to gain authorization again before you repeat that, because obviously this is radiation, your additional radiation you want to give to your patient. So yes, the difference exists when it comes to the policies and the how-tos. We have more solid policies and more monetary sort of system here, being monitored all the time. We have the IMA, we have the different monitoring bodies, we have the CQC, which is all about the care of patients. Demonstrate that you are delivering quality care to these patients. But of course, in Nigeria, we didn't have all of that. We have the Radiographers Board of Nigeria. These are it is a body that is in charge of the radiography practice in Nigeria. They are doing things, but it is not as robust as we have in the UK, whereby you're accountable, you're held responsible for every single action. In Nigeria, we couldn't, do some things, say for instance, perform CPR on a patient, because we're probably not trained to do so. If the hospital does not train you to provide that sort of support to your patient, then you don't have the ability to do so. Right. Or if you don't know how to perform cannulation on a patient, which is actually not within our scope in school, then you don't know how to do so. It's the nurse who has to do that. But here in the UK, they provide you, before you do any of these things, you have to have a certificate. And so they provide you the training and the certification for you to perform all of this.
Yeah. No, that's really great, Nnaemeka. Talking about certification, so from what you just said, I understand that there are certifications you kind of get on the job. But before entry, I'm just thinking like someone who is looking to get into this field. So before entry, you mentioned that you need your degree, you need that professional registration. Is there any other prerequisites for getting a job as a radiographer in the UK?
For you to get a job as a radiographer, the only thing you need is to have your BSc, which makes you a radiographer. You have a license, practicing license in your home country. And so your practicing license is what then, and some other documents is what then you will provide to the UK Registration Council. When you send them all of these documents, they'll cross-check and double-check and see that you are actually a radiographer that you said you are. And then they issue you this HCPC license. So with HCPC license, you can then apply. So depending on the job you're going for, if you want to be an MRI specialist, if you come for an interview, they will probably ask to see if you've got like a postgraduate diploma in MRI, which is different from BSc. But it's not a requirement for you to get a HCPC license.
Right.
It might be a requirement for you to get a particular specialized role. If you want to be a sonographer, you might be asked, have you done a postgraduate diploma course or additional studies in sonography? Because that is really more subjective in practice. So this is just the difference when it comes to certification. There is nothing really much to certification apart from get your HCPC license, apply for the jobs. Then in the job, you could be asked about for the license.
Yeah. So there are basics you need, but additional qualifications or postgraduate diploma, like you said, or even experience could give you an edge when you're looking for a job. Yeah. But the basic is still the basic for what you need.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. Nnaemeka, I think my last question would then be, I think I've touched on this a little bit here and there, but my last question to you would be, for someone who is either in Nigeria and still studying or practicing radiography and wants to get a job in the UK, like yourself, that will sponsor their visa. It's a broad question, but what would your best advice to that person be?
Who wants a sponsored visa, you said?
Yeah, who wants to get a job? So, who wants to get a job and hopefully the job sponsors their visa?
Yeah, right. So I would usually advise anybody who wants to come to the UK as a radiographer, I would say, number one is get all the knowledge that you can get. It is easier to get all of them back home. Know your stuff. Don't rush into coming to the UK if you don't have experience. It will give you a soft landing when you have experience. I'm not saying you shouldn't come to the UK if you're a graduate radiographer, for instance. You can, but you might struggle having to integrate into the system. So you would probably want to expose yourself to basic practice in the hospital before you come to the UK. And it's really a very beautiful experience working in healthcare system here because it's advanced. It's one of the best in the world. Then you have all the support you would get, whatever support you want to do. MSc, your trust can sponsor you. They can decide to send you for further studies. If you want to grow in your career or your profession, they can help you do that. There is really constant, continuous professional development happening in the healthcare practice or system here, which does not really happen back home. So I would say, prepare yourself and open your hands to these opportunities. But most importantly is get yourself equipped before you come to the UK.
Okay. So does it mean someone who, so what exactly is this? Talked about a graduate can be employed without experience, right? But you said it's better if the person had some working experience in Nigeria, so that it gives them a softer landing. What exactly do you mean by that?
So we've had issues where you are being told you're going to be trained when you arrive.
Right.
But you are not actually going to get that training. Do you get what I mean? The training is extensive. They probably expect you to, just learn about the policies, learn about this and get rolling, learn on the job. because there's this assumption that, oh, you should know XYZ already. So because they don't know that in Nigeria, you have to probably do your internship, you do your NYSC, and then start working, experience. It's different here. So you struggle with having to understand a lot of things that is really basic. And so if you're struggling to understand when we talk about patient care, because you've not really exposed yourself in an actual hospital in Nigeria before coming over, then it begs the question, how competent you are in dealing with issues. And so you want to really gain experience, basic experience. I'm not saying you shouldn't, there's nothing wrong if you come and you're struggling. And like I said, the pay is going to be very basic for a graduate radiographer. So if you really want to progress very fast in your career, you'd want to come in with experience. You want to change, your level after a certain period. Maybe after 6 months, you say, okay, well, I've had enough. I think I'm due for the next level, But graduate radiographer, you probably have a contract that says you're not going to leave this place for XYZ years or XYZ duration because you need. Do you get what I mean? So it's a lot more demanding from graduate radiographers who do not really have experience or exposure yet. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. You could decide to come in and struggle, or you could decide to prepare yourself better to shoot faster rather than come. So that makes sense. Nnaemeka, you have a YouTube channel where you discuss things around radiography. So I will put a link to that in the description for people to check out. But just spend 1 minute talking about your channel, why you're doing what you're doing, and what's up with it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Obina. So my channel is just really everything radiography, radiology, everything healthcare. I started last year. I just have a couple of videos there. I interviewed the very big shots. I've interviewed the registrar of the RRBN I mentioned. That's the Board of Nigeria. I've interviewed some high-end entrepreneurs who are in providing diagnostic service in Nigeria. So this is just to share my profession to everyone who wants to know about my profession, and also to encourage younger radiographers or other radiographers who really want to go into different areas of the profession, including entrepreneur practice. Yeah.
That's a good one, Nnaemeka. I'll put the link in the description. And once more, thank you very much for making all the time. And hope I'll catch you sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All right. Yeah, bye.